Let me just kick this off. Thank you, Faye. This was the lights are on, but nobody's home film, and I have to say I watched it. I just had to round robin and grab four films of the descriptions, and yours bubbled to the top, and it was actually one of the best films I've seen in a very long time on the subject,
Oh,
and
thank
just
you.
so many other things there. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So real quick, I'm going to put a written of this up on Instinct, but if you are okay, I do plan on making either a video or audio stream of this and putting it up at a later time. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. So let's kick in. I was the video is great. I see now that you were the actual lead in that. So
hmm
you wrote it and obviously directed it and were the lead in it. Um so the production on that, what was the hardest scene to shoot technically? I'm going to say this because your cinematography in there was outstanding. I was
Thank you.
watching so many of those shots of there in front of the house, and then when you're walking up, I was like, "Whoa, these are very good shots." And the ones where you were sitting on the dirt when she was saying, the home that we live in might have been torn down, but the ground, we're still here, right?
hmm
There was just so much there, and those shots were outstanding. How did you come up with those? Or, I mean, how technical were they? What was the hardest scene to shoot?
well, I would say maybe the hardest shot in the whole film was actually the one that is in like the very beginning in the bedroom when it's like sideways and she sits up and it like the camera like also moves with her.
Hmm.
Just because it
Yeah.
was like the cinematographer had to like hold it sideways and have like someone hold him, and then he had to like move it in time with like me so that I didn't go fast enough that
Right.
I like went out of the frame. Um,
Sure.
yeah, I would say that was definitely the hardest shot of like
Okay.
the whole film.
Because I mean, there was just so many in there. I was like, it's very well done. Your cinematography is good. I
Mhm.
love your tech on that. So, I mean, just the way that you delivered that. So I've been in some films and I've paid attention. I took film classes and I watch. I'm like, man, this is very good quality. And for a short, it was very good. You
Thank
told a
you.
great story in there. I was trying to figure out what was the drug that she was taking.
Well, it's like never really specified, but it was kind of supposed to be like, Xanax or like some sort of like benzodiazepine.
Okay. 'Cause it looked sort of like that, but I was like, "Okay, based on how she's talking, the response, would it be a Xanax or some sort of, soma or ecstasy or something in there?"
Hmm.
Some of the newer versions of ec I was like, "So what was" so I was very curious just because how you're talking about that, because, it flows into, uh the Danger Boy phase, or the Danger Boy subject. Do you know what I'm talking about with the Danger Boy?
Mm-mm.
Um, so when I was in high school in the late 80s, early 90s, and the young men would come out, they would go and get into what they call the Danger Boy phase, where they'd be very promiscuous, do a lot of drugs, and just say, "Nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, I'm going to die very young anyway." And then they would live very crazy. We call that phase Danger Boy. And you showed that very well, that there you were in a situation depressed enough to take those risks.
Mm-hmm.
That was wonderful. I mean, you covered that very well. Can you talk a little bit about that side of it?
Yeah, well, I guess like Danger Boy, or I guess in with the film like Danger Girl.
Right.
Um,
Right,
uh,
yeah, but yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
Yes.
it's like
Okay.
I know, yeah, that like experience that you speak of. Yeah, I think it's definitely like, yeah, I was aiming to sort of depict a sort of like, I guess like nihilism, or yeah, it's like you're so depressed, and if you feel like you don't have a future, then you start to act like, like you just like start engaging in like risky behavior because you're like, well, if I don't have a future, why am I so concerned with like maintaining like a present sense of security or safety for myself?
And so that was a real part of your history? Was that a real aspect of some of what you've been through there?
Yeah, some of it. Some of it was, I mean, it's kind of like maybe more of like a mishmash of like different things, or like the
Okay.
emotions are definitely all real. Some of it
Yeah.
is definitely fictionalized, but some of it is real, definitely.
Okay. Um, again, just very well done. So let me just explain. I get thousands of, hundreds of records every year, hundreds of albums every year that I have to listen to and cover. I see a lot of film, and very rarely, I mean, I have to really let the good ones bubble to the top just because of everything I get sent my way. And yours was that good. And I would, I mean, I'm like saying, hey, when that's free to the world, I want to show it to everybody when it's available because it's very good. I want to show it to my daughter's friends as well. So, um, the house. What was the symbolism of the house? Again, I dissect film, so
Mhm.
just work with me here.
Yeah.
The symbol of the house, was that her former life or her transition? Uh, that I was seeing some of that, but I wanted to make sure that I understood those pieces correctly.
Yeah, I think that the house is like very much connected like to the entire neighborhood, and it's like throughout the film we see her like she's like very desperately like looking for the house, and we kind of understand that she's looking for it because she's like, oh well, like, I'll come back and everything will be like completely the same. But it's like everything up until we see the house is like different, or it's like completely, or it's gone. And so it's kind of being thrown in her face the whole time that like nothing is the same. So why would like the house be there? And so when she
Hmm.
gets to the house and she's like, oh, like this is the one thing that is here, and I'll be able to, even though everything else is gone, this is still here. And so maybe I can like live the life that like I left behind that I'm just trying to pick up now. But then when
Hmm.
she goes inside and it's completely empty, it's like that's like I feel like when it sinks in of like this like whole really long afternoon of her walking through the neighborhood, that everything is like really gone, and that the like fantasies and the memories and that life that she had are like also gone, and that she has to like let go of that.
Okay, yeah, because you did mention how there was nothing left of the neighborhood, and how even the spirit of it, the whole personality of it, had disappeared. And then yeah, we saw the house that was damaged. And your name, finding your name, that was a interesting part of the film. Can you talk about that? The Because she kept saying, I don't know what name I'm going to have, and how would I, that was something powerful. Can you talk about that side of it?
Yeah, well, so the thing with the name is that I definitely wanted something that like bookended the film. And,
Hmm.
we start with that. That's like one of the first stories we hear connected to the bridge, and then at the end, it's like we hear like the fantasy conversation. But I think the other thing with the name is I tried to tie it back into what we were talking about of like being like I don't have a future, so I'm gonna like engage in all these risky behaviors. But I feel like also if you I don't know, I feel like picking a name for yourself is very much like I'm naming myself so that I can go into the world and live as this person. But when you feel like maybe you don't have a future, then it kind of becomes something like, why would I even name myself if I don't think I'll be here for much longer?
So because part of that, I was seeing that, pardon me, so are you able, sorry, is she saying, I don't feel like I should take a name on because I'd be committed to something that I know isn't going to last very long? Or do I want to commit to this knowing that I'm not going to be around? I saw some of that. Um and I just, the hesitancy of it. So I was right about that, right? That she was really not, like, not afraid to pick the name, but didn't see a point to it.
Yeah, it's almost like, she's like everything, like something that I was so excited to do just ended up being another thing that I ran from is, yeah, very much like, yeah, there's like a hesitancy, but also kind of like, yeah, what's the point of me like trying to like self actualize myself if I'm not going to be here?
Okay. So that was powerful there. And the grandmother, or when she went out, was found there, and then the line about the grass. What was the symbolism there? That was a pretty hard part. I cried during that part. I mean, I cried during the whole thing, but there was, I saw this as, there you were with your best friend, that beautiful girl, right? And that you were transitioning, but you hadn't found love, and a lot of the love and just things around you was just falling apart anyway.
Mhm.
What was that about the? What was that about the grandmother in the grass and that? Because you spoke very vividly of that, the imagery there.
Yeah, well, I think it's very much kind of like, I guess, in theme with, like, the rest of the film. It's like, in some way, the grandma leaves and they talk about, like, the grass that she used to have at her house, and it's almost like she wandered to this grass and saw it and maybe thought that she was home, and so that's, like, why she decided to just lay there, and that's, like, where she passes away.
Hmm. Was that a real part of your life?
No, no, that was more inspired by, like, in the neighborhood that we shot in, which is, like, the neighborhood that I grew up in, is there's, like, very commonly you see, like, roadside graves of people who were, like, hit by cars or, like, people who died, stuff like that, so I kind of wanted to give, um, a nod to that or a reference to something that, like, you see it, like, all the time every day, and there's, like, so many different ones that are, like, very extravagant, like, with, like, flowers, lights, and, like, teddy bears, or there's some that are just, like, crosses, so I wanted to, do something with that, and so that's how it came to be.
So where was this filmed, by the way? What neighborhood was this?
So it was filmed in Tucson, Arizona, and
Okay.
then the neighborhood is, like, Midvale.
So you're right over the border there. You're not far from the border at all there.
Mm-mm, no, it's like, I think, like, an hour or 2, like, 2 hours, I
Yeah.
think, from the border.
Yeah. Wow. Because it was that type of dejected, neighborhood, all of that. I mean, your visuals in there were just wonderful, and you told an amazing story. Have you been able to reach other people in your situation, the young people? Have you been able to, uh, yeah, have you reached them? Have you touched them? So I hope this film does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, in Tucson, it's kind of interesting because I feel like there is, like, a trans community here, as there is, like, a larger LGBT community, but in some ways, I feel like it's very scattered, or, like, it's not there's, like, there is, like, places where LGBT people can gather and, hold space with each other, but I feel like in some ways there's not necessarily, like, a very strong, like, center of, like, "Oh, you can come here," and, like, you know? But I hope to, like, help cultivate or find or, like, work with, um, something that might help cultivate more of a centered, like, LGBT trans, like, space here in Tucson
Okay.
because it's definitely needed.
Yeah, yeah, it's everywhere. Come on, not just
Yeah,
Tucson, but
everywhere, like,
everywhere. Yeah, yeah. I'm in
no.
Salt Lake, so you can imagine what it's like here.
Yeah,
Final
oh,
question: have you found more completion in closure in your transition because of this film?
um, I don't know, not necessarily. I feel like I made the film, like, I had been, like, 4 years into my transition, and I feel like I making it was maybe more, like, of a way to reconcile with things that I had already made peace with a little bit, like, more like reflecting on things I may have felt in the past and kind of engaging with them in a very, confrontational way, which, was why the film, I think, was maybe a little bit hard to make in that sense, but I think before I had made the film, I had made peace with at least, like, that portion of the subject matter.
All right. Well, that was a great film. I hope everybody does go and see it. And I wish you all the success in the world. And
Oh, thank you.
congratulations on your transition and where it's taken you. So,
Mhm.
with this, you have everything in the world to be proud of. So,
Yeah, thank you so much.
okay, good luck on that then.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for talking to me.
Okay, I have Alyssa here from Alyssa, and she's the one who made that fabulous movie Break In. Thank you for joining us, Alyssa.
Yeah, well, happy to be here.
So, um, Okay, break in. Was this your first comedy that you've shot full size like that, or I mean, you know what I mean for something like this?
hmm I did one other short film. Actually, now I'm trying to remember what have I actually shot. What I can remember, I shot one other short film. I wrote and directed it in I don't know 2019, and it
Hmm.
was slightly more of a dramatic you know, dramedy, I guess is the word.
Okay.
And after like doing the festival circuit with that film and being like, this is the deep reason why I made it, and this is what it means to me. I was just so tired of taking myself seriously. So, the aim with this one was to make like the stupidest movie that we could all put our heads together and do. And I think it worked. Hopefully.
Oh, hey, mission accomplished. It was pretty gnarly. It was great. I had I read the synopsis of it when I got the
hmm
list of all the films, and that one bubbled to the top. I read like 30 of them that were
mm
LGBTQ related. I was like, oh man, this is and some of them it's like not interesting, but this one I was like, ooh, this one looks fun. And so I went and I watched it, and I loved the story. It was so well done. There she is. She's the gay girl, completely high anxiety. She's got her gay best friend who's just jabbing at her. He's just like, he's relentless, and that was
hmm
awesome. Point one illustrated, every woman needs a gay man for a best friend. Done. You got that out
it's
of the
true.
way.
It's true. Perfect
But
compliment.
I was surprised at how many times you were able to change direction in the story and how well that was done.
Mm,
It just kept turning. It was like we were in a maze. Like, where's this going next? Where's because I would think it's going one way, and then you drop something new in there, and you would steer it everywhere. How did you pull that off? And 'cause you did it very
mm.
well. And yes, like you said, you wanted to make it the
Thank
the
you.
silliest, campiest, like, and but like boom, 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 boom. It was.
hmm
How did you come up with those ideas to squeeze that many into such a short film?
You know, I think when you I wrote the part for that actor Kimia Bipornia, who is amazing and a great friend, and I was like, okay, what does Kimia do well? And I was like, okay, she does embarrassment really well. She does hijinks and physical comedy really well. So I was just kind of writing to her and just like letting whatever popped into my head like go on the page. There was some like really overly weird stuff that we like cut out, like someone dancing in a clothes rack. Like it was so stupid, but I think boiling all these random ideas down to like the core of what would kind of exacerbate this character's emotion in the moment kind of helped it feel like a little cohesive. Like all those pieces of like other characters reading her erotic fiction to her was like exacerbate this emotion from her, like heighten things like so that was kind of how all these there were it's easy to kind of think of just what if she farted, like just random stuff, but kind of lining it up around one character's want is sort of was our guiding light a little bit.
So you you did very well with, and I know because you're working with such a small time frame of the production of this, 10 minutes or whatever, but you had to uh, create such a backstory into why this was happening, what was going on, and you did that. So, excuse me. Um, ha- again, bring that up. How you were able to? I mean, what were you thinking? How many ideas did you have that you were able to or hoping to squeeze into that first 30 seconds, and then you keep every step you introduce more of the backstory without having to say anything to tell it. It was all just being told by what they were doing and saying. But
Mm.
uh just how yeah, how did you manage to squeeze those many ideas into there as well? This movie had so much just crushed into that such a short period of time.
Yeah. I don't know, I think it's just a matter of writing random, things that felt like they were from when the characters feel full, then doesn't feel like I have to come up with all these ideas. It feels like, oh, this character would obviously do this. This character would like obviously do that. And I feel like the actors helped a lot with that as well. Like Riley, who plays the best friend,
Mhm.
Oliver, he came in for his audition and he was like, I have to tell you something. And I was like, okay, this character, his whole thing is he loves love, and that's pretty much it. He loves love, and he'll do anything to like watch somebody fall in love. And he's like, I have to tell you something. When I was like 5 years old, I my parents had to hide their wedding video from me because I would watch it over and over again until I melted the VHS tape. He's like, because I loved love that much. And he's like, I love love. Like that was him as a person. So I think the reason there are a lot of ideas in there in the writing, but like I feel like it feels natural because the actors came in and they were like, I think my character would do this. I think it would do that and say this. And there was some improv on set. So yeah, I can't take complete credit for it. It was really like a group effort.
So that was a lot of method acting. That was just they told their backstory just by being who they were. Okay.
Truly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
that was great. So the next step, the locksmith, how did like okay, the locksmith, first of all, I said I'm a certified locksmith. I didn't say I could do this. I mean, just it was
yeah. Yeah.
like every slapstick, it wasn't slapstick, but every situation that somebody had to do something, it just turned the wrong house. I mean, all that coming through, right? I was
Mhm.
just like, I was like, no. I mean, comedic ideas there. How did you come up with getting into that much trouble? Like, okay, well,
Honestly, it's
let me interject. Let me
uh-huh.
interject here, okay?
Okay.
It was like it was like every season of Breaking Bad where they would take one step and then something bad would happen and shift them back and then in another direction, and then they'd sort of almost get ahead where they wanted to be, and then they'd get smacked into a different direction and go back two steps. It was like that in Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy. And I'm watching
Mm.
this and I'm laughing. I'm like, this is a Shakespearean mock-up, man. In every step you took, I was like, how could you like weave that much trouble in there and make it comedic? Is your life really that
Mhm.
way, or was it just you're good at? I mean, talk about that for a
Oh,
minute, please.
man. Yeah, I'm trying to think. My life is not that way at all. I mean, there are always little like weird moments in our lives that are like this is should go in a movie, but never never to the point of calling a locksmith and breaking into the wrong house. But
Breaking
I
into the wrong
just
house.
yeah, it truly started with character and like thinking about I was like, okay, I want this like butch lesbian like heart like a little defensive kind of character who like can't admit when she's wrong and like is like very protective and is like we got this. And I was like, well, what would that character do wrong? Like probably break into the wrong house, like probably take a locksmith oath but not be an
Probably
actual
send a
locksmith,
text
like
to the
and
send
and it
erotic
was also
fiction to the woman she's dreaming about. Yeah, that was
I was also thinking about like who would so Oliver is the one who reaches out to the locksmith. Who would Oliver know? Like he knows like I'm sure the weirdest people in the city, right? So it was really it all came from character, which I think I is why it hopefully works.
okay. Well, the two best lines in the whole film. Okay.
Mhm.
Um I know your mom, and I'll tell her what you do. No, I'm a D. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're a drug. No, I'm a DJ, right? I'm a DJ, right? That was I that one. And this is not goodbye. This is Best Buy. I mean, that was so. The two best lines, brilliant. Okay, I
Oh,
watched it
thank
a
you.
couple of times, and I assumed that the other woman that she was hitting on was also gay and all right.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
um, I'm like, so they sneak into this lesbian's apartment. She wakes up in the middle of the night. She's moving around, all that. I, the only redeeming thing about the situation was she found out her coworker had a crush on her. I'm like, I would be, and then destroying the phones. I mean, just one step after another. But then the whole cheesy line of, well, you're gonna buy me a new phone, but please, it's okay. Just the whole thing that the girl falls for, or at least is interested after it.
Mhm.
I was like, this is a
Mhm.
bad '80s sitcom tying up the half hour episode. And
Yeah, exactly.
so
The
the
mhm.
most important question: did you have rights from Best Buy to use that line?
No, and I was a little worried. I was like, "Are we gonna get in trouble?" And on the day of shooting, I was like, Nusha needs a line where Melody is like, "I need a new phone," and none of that Best Buy refurbished shit. And then Kimia goes, or Nusha goes in and says their refurbished phone policies. So I was like
Right.
Googling phone policies of like, can you just read this like on the day of? And they just that line was so hard for them to say. They were just like, and we have and a phone because it was just too much to remember.
Uh
But
huh.
they I what the lines I'm trying to remember. I feel like I had a funny story about the lines you like. Oh,
Yeah.
where
Yeah. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
the drug dealer goes like
Yeah.
I am a DJ and then leaves. There there's just so many there's a lot of logic holes in this in this story where it's like why I won't puncture logic holes in my own story, but that line was originally longer. We had to cut it for time where Melody is like, you really want your mom to know you're not actually a DJ? And then the drug dealer had this longer thing where he was like, I am a DJ on Tuesday nights, like at like, Epicenter.
At this
Fuck
club.
you. Like, yeah. But then I realized that one of my friends is a DJ on Tuesday nights after we
At that
shot.
club.
And then I
Oh.
not at that club, not at that club, but I was like, oh no, she'll think it's a dig to her, which it wasn't. It was just like, sometimes you say pick up on something from memory and don't realize it. So we were like, okay, he's just a DJ generally, and then he leaves, and that's enough to get him out.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay. So, all right, we're up on time, and we're going to. I'm gonna have to sign off here, but thank you so much, Alyssa. This has been a great
yeah.
conversation. Wonderful movie. I
Thank you
hope
for
that
having
I
me.
hope it goes well and that everybody goes to watch it. So, or yeah, I hope I
Thank
just
you.
if everybody wants a good just absurd laugh, this will take you there. And so mission accomplished. Congratulations on that.
Thanks. That's so sweet. This has been lovely.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great.
So I understand it's been a lot of work to get this lined up for you. So I
Yes,
do speak I do speak a lot of Hebrew, but we'll have to do this one in English. So
okay. My
um,
English is not so well, so I will try. Okay.
oh no, that's great actually. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go like with 5 questions basically, and then because it's bullet interviews, right? So but yeah, I do appreciate you taking the time on this. That movie was amazing. It was very well done. Whose
Thank
story
you.
was it?
It's based on my personal story. I'm a trans woman.
I can't hear you.
Um,
I can't hear you.
can you hear me?
I can now. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I said it is based on my personal story. I'm a trans woman, um, and I grew up in a religious family, Orthodox family. I was born in Bnei Brak, which is a very Orthodox city in Israel. My parents are Orthodox, my whole family. Um, yeah.
And so, did you? So I loved the Hebrew and watching the old practices there as well because I spent a lot of time around the Jewish and Israeli folk over the years. Did you get any flack? Did you get any trouble from the rest of your community there for doing this, or have you been exiled?
No, no, it was hard, because it's like a mirror, to my family and to the society. But I just did it with all the courage and what I had
Yes,
to
that
do.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. How did your family handle you transitioning, becoming, coming and transitioning? How did they handle that? Because I know it's different in a lot of parts of Israel.
Yeah, it was difficult. Um, in Israel, it's very machoism. How do you say it?
Hmm. Yeah,
It is a
chauvinism. Yes.
yeah, a society, and in the Orthodox society is more difficult, because woman is woman and man is a man, and it is black and white. So they didn't know what is to be a trans woman, or what is to be, or what is mean, what it means. So it was difficult. I think it's difficult because they add all their life. They have their son, their beloved son, like the mother in the film.
Yes.
They so love me as their son, and to accept me as their daughter, it was a difficult process, because when I did it, I I understand that I need to live like this, and there is no question. But to them, it was just the start of the process, because they need to mourn about the son and to accept me as their new daughter. And it was more difficult because um, it's opposite to all what they grew up about what is to be a man in our society, in the religion, and all of this.
So that you say mourning. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I had when I lived in France, I had a friend Shlomi. Um, he was there training the he was training the Polish and French special forces in France.
yeah.
So because he was I guess he had worked in the Mossad and the Samsung Squad and all of that, and
I
he was
was
training.
also I was an officer as a boy. I was an officer in the army
Okay,
here,
okay.
and
So he was and he was there training the Polish and the French, and he was gay, and he told me he just had to leave Israel because um when he came out and he told his family, they chased him out of the house and said don't come back, and he came back about 4 days later to try and talk to them, and the mirrors were covered,
yeah,
and they ignored him. They pretended that he wasn't there,
yeah. So
and
so it is, not how to say it. It was more easy for me, easy, but I like in the story in the film. I was not invited to events of my family, to my bar mitzvah's brother, um,
yeah.
and to all the events, and they hide me for a lot of time, from the family and the other people. So I didn't live in home, but I had to do all the process by myself with no help, and it's a very difficult process to do,
Oh,
by yourself.
I can imagine. I actually I interviewed a non-binary trans woman as well from Jerusalem last year, and it was funny because for me, I had to figure out Mashlomet and Mashlomchet and all that. It was like
Yeah.
I'm like I cannot do this right at this point, And she was very gracious about it. She was wonderful, but how does y- yeah how even that part? I mean just the addressing you properly. How did that work in Israel? She said it was difficult. She said, fine, one day I'm, a woman, the other day I'm a man to them. I don't care. I still believe in just loving a person as a person and respecting them that way. But uh, how hard was it to get people to identify, to recognize you as your true self?
Um,
Or how long did it take? I mean, just.
it was very quick in my process because I just did it, and today I'm living as a woman, and if I don't tell no one knows, and
Mm-hmm.
it's complex because of it, because um, I'm a regular woman
Mm-hmm.
for people, but they don't know my identity, and then I need to tell, and it has these difficulties of how they look at me, how can they understand um the process that I have been through. Like going out with straight guys, and then you need to tell them that I need to tell them that I'm trans, and it's difficult because people don't understand it. Uh, no,
So have
because
you been able to go ahead? Go ahead, finish what you were saying.
yeah, because what I said, it is you, man is a man, woman is a woman, and we don't have the space to explore something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
So, how have you been able to find love? I mean, that was part of the story that I saw in the film. It was very, I guess, I guess let me explain. I'm here in Utah. It's just as religious a place as where you are. We're very, very conservative, and I was raised to be pretty much what your family was as well. Very strict, and my father was gay, and he kept it hidden. And once he found out, because of the upbringing, because of all that, I was a terrible son. I was I treated him the way that your family treated you,
Hmm.
and it took me a long time to realize that there are a million things around that, but I was wrong about some of my issues with my father, and so I could see, and I actually did feel a lot of guilt watching your film. That hit me very hard,
Oh,
and
I'm happy to hear that because I think sometimes we need mirror to see how we look like, and and yeah, I had boyfriends
mm-hmm,
before, and I had relationships, and like this. My new film is talking about it, about a trans woman who tries to find the love, but it's difficult for her. Um, you know.
well, so have you been able to reach the young people and other people in your country because of this? I mean, has it been seen, and have you been able to help others with this? Or has it?
Um,
I mean, has it been seen by the rest of the country? I mean, we just got it here. I got to watch it just 2 or 3 days ago. But
yeah, I was interviewed here in Israel, and told my story, and people saw it, and it was you know it opened their heads about what is to be trans here in Israel, and what you need to go to um, this process and life after. Um, And yeah, I think that today young people, I think, more open mind. They have they have more open mind for gender and sexuality and all of this. So I think we are in the new way to think differently, all the society, not only trans people or gay or lesbian, also straights and all the society to think different about what is this manhood, what is this, why we are so obsessed with our gender, why it's so frightening us to see people that cross the line in their gender.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's again it's a mirror to everyone, to think why I'm so obsessed with my with who is the man that I am, and why trans women so frightening me
Mm-hmm.
by our
Wow.
identity.
Wow. Well, that was thank you. Thank you for that.
I'm
And
sorry. I it's out for me in English. I
oh no,
hope
that was great. I understood
that you
everything.
understand me. Okay, okay.
Yes. Um so anyway, good to meet you here. I was going to say um that film, I found it so interesting that there were all those people able to connect the way that they did, and it just gave me warm fuzzies to see that. And there were some beautiful moments and some harsh moments without any dialogue really. But what was it that made you decide to, first of all, how did you get into those parties?
Mhm.
Because that looked like the kinds of parties that cool people go to and that I don't get invited to. But the other is, what made you decide to make this film after doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I made this film in my first year of my MFA in documentary film at Stanford. I actually just graduated from Stanford, but I was a student at the time when I made the film. And as a part of our program, we are obligated to make 3 films a year. And my third film came right at the beginning of the pandemic. The shelter in place in the Bay Area was announced like a week before I was supposed to begin production on a film. So I was like, crap, what am I going to do? And that was just such a bizarre time for all of us. You know, we were all like panic buying food at the grocery store and like didn't know how long we were going to be locked down for, or like what
Yeah.
this pandemic was. And so me and some of the people who were in my cohort with me, we were all on the same campus. We weren't allowed to see each other, and we started having our own Zoom dance parties. And there was something like really joyous about it and really liberating, because I think I'm a little bit physically awkward, and sometimes when I'm dancing in public, like having other eyes on me makes me uncomfortable. And it was so amazing to like dance alone, but like communally. But there's also something like just tremendously sad about it as well. It was just like a very bizarre thing, and I would imagine like, what if my next door neighbors were looking in on me, seeing me just sort of like dancing like with abandon with my headphones on, no music. You know, it probably looked ridiculous. And so I was sort of, there was some allure to this idea of like the joy, but also kind of intense sadness and isolation of these dance parties that I was having with my friends. And then I used to listen to this podcast called Nancy. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a queer podcast by WNYC. And they had like a
No.
special, yeah, it's been canceled now, tragically. But they had a special about like what are queer people doing to cope with the pandemic. And someone came on to talk about like, oh, last week, me and my friends, like, joined this like Zoom dance party. It was insane. Like I think it just started. It was very very early, and I was like, oh well, that sounds really interesting. Like I'm queer, and I had this idea of the Zoom dance party. I thought I was just going to do it with some people I knew. And then I logged into Club Quarantine for the first time. And the way you get into the party is Club Quarantine has an Instagram account. And at exactly 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific, in the bio of the Instagram account, they would put in a like a like a sort of like a username and a password that you could enter to get into the party, and it would only be live for like a short period of time, and you had to be there right at that moment, like right as soon as the clock turned 9 or 6, depending on what coast you're on or where you are in the world, and join the party. And so I joined for the first time, and I was like terrified. I'd never, I don't know, there's something very voyeuristic. Like, you don't know who's going to be in this party. I didn't know what kind of things were going to be happening there. So I didn't have my camera on. Yeah, my camera was off. And it was just incredible. I mean, it was just like mesmerizing. There were 1,000 people in this party, and every person had this like, oh, not everyone, but most people had like amazing lighting setups and costumes. And but then there were also people who were like putting their kids to bed, or like I saw so many times someone would have like their computer or a phone or something like at the dinner table, and there'd be like an entire family having dinner. And then it was almost like the camera or the computer or whatever they were using to log in was like another seat at the table. It was just, I was sort of like, it was like the most bizarre phenomenon because you saw everything. Like I saw a couple propose to one another. I saw a woman in the hospital with her newborn baby. She had just given birth and she was there like showing off the baby. Like you saw everything. And it was just sort of like, it was this amazing, it sort of felt like it was like both like a queer nightclub where like people were like, I don't know, you know, like literally like, taking their pants off and like getting naked, but also like people just sort of like going to sleep and like doing their chores. And it was like the whole range of human experience was sort of happening in this club. And it felt like people weren't just using it as a place to party, but as a place to like sort of have someone else bear witness to what life was like in this time when they were so alone. And I just found it so fascinating and so beautiful. And I was also completely alone during that time because it was early pandemic. Like, you know, we were not supposed to leave our house unless it was absolutely necessary. And so I became sort of like a little bit obsessive about the film. And I ended up going every single night for 2 months. And the party was 6 hours long. So every night for 6 hours. Yeah, every night for 6 hours for 2 months, I sat in that party and I recorded every single night because I thought, you know, I knew there was something there. I thought there was something so beautiful, and I loved like the texture of Zoom, and I loved the community, and of course, there's like the whole historical aspect of queer people often sort of finding community through through nightlife and through clubbing spaces, and queer people again doing that in the pandemic. I thought was really fascinating. Um, but it was also like very much a refuge for me too, and it became a community for me as well.
Were you with your current partner at that time?
I actually was not with my current partner at that time, and funny
Okay.
enough, I met my current partner over Zoom, but not in a Zoom dance party. I met them a totally different way. But people often ask, like, did you meet in the club? I wish I did, but there's so many love stories from Club Quarantine too. So many people I know who fell in love with
Well,
people they met through the club and
okay.
are together
I'm watching
now.
this. Well, I'm watching this, and I'm like, okay. In a lot of ways, it seemed like a really gnarly queer dance party,
Mm-hmm.
right? Queer club dance party. I have friends who spin at them,
Mm-hmm.
and but the one thing was missing was the guy in the corner selling ecstasy. I guess you didn't have that. That was the one part that you couldn't have, right?
I did have a cut where there was a whole drug taking sequence because there was a lot of
Okay.
drugs.
Oh,
And
I'm
it ended
sure.
up,
Yeah.
it ended up getting cut, but I used to have a big drug sequence in the film.
So, well, you would need to get their permission to air
Right,
that.
right.
Um, one of the ones that stood out was there was somebody dancing,
Mm.
and I saw up there narration posts that had nothing to do with the dancing. There's a fire down my street. There's
Mm.
this, right? You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
What tell me about that. That one was, it was neat to see the guy dancing and the silliness
Mm,
of it all. That was part of the
mhm,
point. But then
mhm,
that happened, and I was like,
mhm.
oh, that kind of shifted the moment. And how could
Yeah.
this guy be dancing while this is going,
Right,
and that.
right, right.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so over the course of the time I made the film, the the world was changing rapidly because initially we thought, okay, there's a global pandemic. That's probably the most traumatic, life altering thing that could happen in this time. And then there was the death of George Floyd, and then that added this
Yes.
additional layer, this additional complicating layer. And many of the people who attend the party, as you can see from the film, are Black. There's a lot of people of color who attended the party, and even the people who weren't people of color, many of them are people who felt very passionate about the Black Lives Matter movement and were very upset by the death of George Floyd. And so the party itself really shifted when when all of that happened. And I think the appetite to dance at a dance party sort of changed because a lot of people weren't around because they were protesting. And so the party sort of went from the space that was just sort of like an escape and a place for like sort of like jubilation to a place where people would come often after having protested in the day and share their experiences of what had happened when they were out. And so, and it also became a place where people would organize and plan events and sort of like share information about like different like police sweeps and what areas were safe and what wasn't and what actions people were taking. And so those some of those came from the experiences of people who were in cities where there was a lot of unrest after the death of George Floyd. And those were like every all the chats in the that you see in the film came from actual chats that people had shared in the club. A few of them came from interviews that I'd conducted with people who were in the club. Those are some of the private chats. But with
Hmm.
that person in particular, that was someone in one of the early days of protesting who was sort of expressing what their experience had been and that the police had been tear gassing their street and some building had been burnt down and and that's why that sequence is then followed by the sort of Black Lives Matter sequence because the club really shifted
Yeah.
then, and it kind of never was the same after because it felt sort of inappropriate to dance, and all the parties ended up becoming sort of like fundraisers to fund for like these causes, and I went from a nightly party to like a once a week party because it just sort of the world wasn't the same anymore, and I think the desire to it just didn't tonally, it just like wasn't appropriate, and people just sort of weren't in the same headspace they had been before.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I had a friend. She's a shut-in, and um, she told the story. She told me about how she doesn't get out. She can't
Mm,
because she has a compromised immune system, and
mm,
she was under house arrest. And for her, there were things like this to connect.
mm,
She was able to connect with people, and she said, had the pandemic not happened, I don't know that I would have been able to connect with. I wasn't connecting with people before, but now
mm,
everybody got to a medium where I was able to talk to them.
mm,
Suddenly
mhm,
I had more opportunities with people, and I get
mhm,
that. But also, like you were saying, there probably were some just terribly shy people like yourself, right?
oh yeah,
Who, and
yeah,
they suddenly found this as an outlet, camera on or off, just to be, to dance badly, whatever. But who were the DJs in there? That kind of thing. I mean, or was it
oh
just a
yeah.
random? How did all that come down?
Oh yeah, well, to your first point, absolutely. Like I think that it's not like, oh, club quarantine, we're going to dance in a virtual club because we can't do it in person. Like it became accessible to people for whatever reason, whether it's because of some kind of physical disability or physical limitation, whether it's social anxiety, or whether, the party was super international. So there were lots of people who lived in places where they could not safely access queer spaces, and club quarantine was their first ever experience like in a queer club. There was one person, this, well, I guess they identify as non-binary person, who was living in Bolivia, who I ended up becoming friends with, and they were explaining to me they were like 21, they were living at home, their parents didn't know that they were queer, and they'd never been to a queer space because in their community in Bolivia there was nothing like this. And
Sure.
every single
Yeah.
night they would lock the door to their bedroom and they would put their headphones on and they would dance at this party. Their parents had no idea what they were doing, and it was just sort of like this outlet for them, like that they that they would have never otherwise had. And so I think, yeah, it was incredible because it made queer spaces accessible to people who'd never be there. And and your question about the DJs, yeah,
See, that
actually,
is beautiful.
it's
That is
amazing.
beautiful. God bless you for that, really.
It's really it's incredible. There's so many stories. Like there's the person who you see in the film who says that he's 17, and and who's like taking the selfies in his bathroom. And his name is Dean. He's
Hmm.
17. So I actually had to get permission from his mom for him to be in this film. And he lives in Tennessee. And he was just saying like his experience living in Tennessee. He lives in a really small town, and he like has aspirations, like wants to be a drag queen, and he's just like has I mean, one, he's really young, so he can't go to queer clubs, but also it's just like this, it's just not an environment that he's ever been exposed to. And so he would do it from his bathroom and he would lock himself in the bathroom and he would like put on his own little drag shows in the bathroom of his house. Like it's just so beautiful. I just found it like amazing. um yeah, it was really incredible, really. And the number of stories I heard from people who were just like, this has really like saved my life or changed my life or introduced me to a community of people I never thought
Mm.
I'd get to be a part of, was just so inspiring. And like, yeah, it was amazing.
Well, so I just a quick joke was that you know how when you make a film, because I've been in films and I'm making one right now, documentary and everything. You had
Mhm.
no control of the production design or what or the camera angle, nothing like that. And I was thinking that is a nightmare for a filmmaker. And I wondered how I was like, I bet she's probably just going, fuck, if I could have just the proper lighting right here and the good angle with this and the proper frame shot, right. I know you were probably doing that, but and you still
Oh
pulled it off.
man, it
So
was so hard. I never made a film. I never made an archival film, and I am a control freak when it comes to my filmmaking. I shoot everything. I direct. I shoot. I edit. Like I'm like nobody touch this. Is my vision, and I'm gonna have it exactly as I want it. And so to like relinquish that control was also like very terrifying, but also sort of freeing because you can't be upset. You can't think, dang, like this shot's out of focus. I didn't like this properly. I wish I'd done this differently. You just sort of have to accept this is what the
but
world's
you weren't
giving
the one
me,
steering
you
the
know?
film. You weren't the one stealing.
Right,
You weren't steering the film or the content. That was
right.
huge.
It's
I
it's
mean,
it's just
so you
out
had no
there.
control over that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's
So
part
it
of
was all
why
coming to you.
it was
Yeah.
crazy. And so there's certain people. So a lot of the film takes place from screen recordings that I did of the party, but some of the film
Hmm.
is from people
Yeah.
that I was in direct contact with. Like there's the person who's in like the purple who's talking about sexting someone from Berlin, and you can like hear him having the
Hmm.
conversation on the phone. And there's the woman with the green screen, and there's like that couple that's kissing, and there's the doctor. So there's a cast of people who I was actually in direct contact with, and we would have conversations, and I had them record themselves on their laptop in the night while they were in the party, so that I could get like the diegetic sound from their space, because otherwise the party, you can't hear anything that's happening. It's just the music.
Right.
No one's audio is on. And so I had them do that. And I was debating, like, do I give them instructions or do I just say, just record yourself and let's just see what happens? And so I was like, I decided no instructions. Let's just see what I get back. And most of the time I was so pleasantly surprised. Like, it was like these cool little gifts, like all these amazing moments I got to discover. A few times I was like, really? That's the angle you chose? Like, why did you, like this one girl, all she did was just sit there and eat gummy worms. And I was like, why did you do this? But yeah, it was a lesson in just like, understanding that there are things we cannot control.
Relinquishing control.
Yes. Yeah. And relinquishing control.
Well,
Yes. Yes.
one of the ones I found the most interesting was the doctor.
Yeah.
And I was kind of chuckling, going, "Oh, HIPAA violation," because there he was with all the stuff behind him. But I saw that, and then there he was going, "Okay, there's a call. Let me put the mask on, grab the thing. I gotta go. Camera's still on. You know, God bless you guys. I love you. I'm back into the fight." And that was probably
Mm-hmm.
one of the more powerful points of the film.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but
That that man's incredible. His name is Hussein. He's a doctor in New York City. He used to be like prior to the pandemic, he was like a primary care doctor who specialized in like LGBTQ health and health for people with HIV. But then when the pandemic
mhm,
hit, he was switched entirely to working with COVID patients. And
sure,
so he explained and so when these recordings took place, those were at like the height of the crisis in New York. And he explained to me that he would join from the hospital because he was just, well, one, he was incredibly isolated because he knew he was working with COVID patients every day. And so he could not see anyone
sure,
else because
right.
it was always very likely he could be infected with COVID. But then also because he was just so surrounded by death, like just so much death and so many hard conversations that he expressed to me felt should have never been had over the phone because a loved one wasn't allowed to be in the hospital and have to deliver this terrible news. He he just needed this outlet so that he could know that there were still people that were like thriving and living, that there was a life outside the hospital where people were experiencing joy, and that it was really the thing that like kept him going, and it was his lifeline for many many months. um and it was
Well,
just like it
kudos
was
to that man.
incredible.
That
Yeah.
was beautiful. He was brave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kudos to that guy.
Hmm.
So, I'm glad that you're able to reach all those people, and that it was that beautiful. I really wish you the best, and I hope this film gives you a lot of success.
Oh, thank you
So,
so much.
thank you for
Yeah,
your time on this one.
of course. Thank you.